Hello Fleet, and welcome back to episode 5 of Epic Battles. And today's episode is going to feature one of my battles that I had in the Warspite last night. Now, before I get started in the actual battle, just a few things. I'm a little bit behind this week in terms of my production schedule. That's because I lost most of my Monday and the early parts of my Tuesday to the car dealership. Because as I mentioned last week in the Sale and Chat episode, I was having issues getting my car repaired, and well, the issues are continuing to spiral into bigger and bigger problems. So hopefully it'll be resolved in the next couple of days, and hopefully it won't take up too much more of my time. But I will try my best to make up for a bit of lost time by hopefully completing 2 episodes in one day. I'll try, no promises. Worst comes to worst, I might have to finish it tomorrow morning, but I will do the best I can. So let's talk about this actual battle. So I'm in a Warspite, which is a tier 6 battleship, and if you look at the team composition, our team has a little advantage and a lot of disadvantages. We've got the advantage in terms of carriers, as we do have a Ryujo, and our other advantage lies in the fact that we have a bunch of Clevelands. Now, the enemy's team's major advantage is the fact they have a lot more battleships. And not only do they have more battleships, they have more of the high tier ones. So while we only have 1 tier 6 battleship, me, they've got 3 tier 6 battleships on their side, as well as 2 tier 4s. So what can be done in this particular battle if I was on the enemy team? Well, if I was on the enemy team, in order to nullify the effects of the carry potentially, 1, I would group up with as many of the cruisers as I can, and 2, push as hard as possible, because with 5 battleships compared to only 3 battleships, they have an increased HP pool, which makes it easier for them to push and easier for them to break through our defenses, because their battleships do carry 1, significant firepower, and 2, just have so much HP they can absorb a lot of damage. So we'll see if the enemy team does something like that and how I will try to deal with it. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I am going to go to a place on the map that is going to provide me, 1, with some kind of cover, and 2, I kind of want to stick closer to my team, because, well, we also have a problem, because if you want to defend a rush, assuming that there might be a rush coming from 5 battleships, we really need the team as together and as close together and concentrated as possible, so that we are able to concentrate as much of our firepower in one space and one area, therefore being able to hopefully defend. The second is that in a situation like this, it is usually not very smart for my team to go on an offensive. So it is not intelligent for my team to now rush the enemy team. And that primarily falls to the fact that our team is much better right now at defense and chipping away at the enemy team's HP than trying to actually rush them, because we have the carrier. We have the only carrier in the battle, and a Japanese carrier like the Ryujo does have quite the capacity to, let's say, wither the HP away from the other team. So you'll see that normally when I am using my scout plane for this sort of long-range artillery shooting view, I have a tendency of deploying the scout plane while I am actually trying to, let's say, shoot at stuff that is running away from me. But in this particular battle, I'm deploying them really early on, and I'm trying to chip away at the HP pool of the enemy battleships and hopefully be able to damage them just that little bit more, so that when they get closer, it's easier to fight. Now, the one mistake I made here, and I did make a little bit of a mistake, is I deployed my scout a tiny little bit too early. And so what's going to happen is that this entire island there, that big island over there, is blocking me. So I'm not really sure if I can get my shots over, so I'm losing very, very precious time for the scout plane, because the scout plane only goes up for like a minute and a half. I think you're only able to really get off about 3 good salvos with the scout up in a battleship. So having sort of burned about maybe 30 seconds off of it was a little bit of a waste, and that was a bit of my mistake. But regardless, I am going to just try to do my best at long range to chip away at HP of the enemy battleships. Primarily, you'll see me that I'm trying to engage the battleships that are presenting a rather more flat sort of armor profile. Earlier I was targeting a New Mexico, but I realized that New Mexico was keeping itself as well angled as possible, and so my reaction was to try to shoot something that was more flat, and that being this Wyoming. So did land a decent first salvo, and we'll see how the second salvo does. Now, the Warspite, one big advantage that I think the Warspite has over a lot of other ships is that the Warspite salvos are very, very tight. And so there we go. See that? That's 20,000 damage off that Wyoming. So that Wyoming, which was feeling pretty brave, all of a sudden has, well, you know, a quarter of its health left, which is not very good when you're trying to push the enemy team. However, if we watch the enemy movement, they are trying to push. I mean, the battleships for the enemy team are getting together and they are pushing. So I think tactically, the battleships on the enemy team did the right thing. The one weakness of the enemy team right now is that their cruisers really haven't, you know, sort of stuck to their battleships. The battleships are doing it alone, and I think this is going to end up costing this enemy team this match. There's another 15,000 on the New Mexico, so that New Mexico now also doesn't feel too great. Just, you know, having your HP melted off is not really much fun when you're in a battleship. And also, mind you, this is the other thing I really like about the Warspite. Its guns are really, really accurate, 1, and 2, when they hit, they really do hit hard. 15-inch guns are no joke at tier 6. So the enemy battleships continue to try to, you know, they're trying. I mean, if you watch the way that they're pushing, they're really pushing hard. It's the enemy cruisers that just, I don't know what they're doing. They're all just, they all seem to be sitting somewhere in the distance, not really helping their battleships. So very, very quickly, they're going to lose their New Mexico. And that is one tier 6 battleship down. And they had already had a tier 4 that was heavily damaged by me earlier. And of course, these two Wyomings are out here by themselves. And again, without much cover, they're going to get focused down. If you look at my team, for example, we're rather compacted together. All of our battleships, our cruisers, and everything are all sort of with each other. And that provides us with this huge firepower advantage that if we wanted to target stuff, it's not too hard. Now, the Wyoming just fired a salvo at me and, of course, did minimal damage. And that's because that Wyoming fired HE. So, again, you know, pro tip for all the battleship captains out there who do watch this show, fire AP really makes a huge difference, because that's all you see me firing, and you'll see the massive damage I'm just putting on these enemy ships. So that Wyoming, the one with about 6,000 HP left, I couldn't really hit him anymore. He's sort of gone away and he's pretty highly angled. So I turned my attention to this Wyoming here. It's got about 7,000 health, and boy, this island is really protecting him well. And well, you know, I'm just going to be patient. I'm going to save that salvo. I'm not going to waste it. I'm going to wait till he gets into an area where I know my shells will be able to drop in on him. There you go, waiting for just that little tiny patch of clear. There you go. There's that little bit of clearness. Fire the salvo, and of course he is going to sail right into it. Of course, by then he'd already been kind of decimated by the cruisers. So, moving on. Now, my team, even though we are nicely concentrated, we have suffered, let's just say, some casualties. We've lost 2 of our Clevelands, and we have lost our Miyogi. And if you look closely on the map, 2 of their Warspites have gotten together, along with a Cleveland and a destroyer. So this is going to turn into tiny little bit of a problem, because back over here it's only pretty much me and a battleship, and there's not really much else. But before I turn to engage the team, I find a Cleveland that was sort of presenting me a side. There you go, nice big salvo. 18,000 damage, and of course that Cleveland is now hurting. And you'll see that I'm sometimes less focused with getting the kill and just more focused on putting out the damage. And the reason why I'm doing that is because, you know, my team can finish off the damage stuff. As a battleship, if I don't get kills, it's not the end of the world, but if I can damage them so heavily that they just become easy kills, or they have to retreat, it eases the pressure on my team. And you'll just see me, I'll just take the shot, I'll cut the HP down, and then I'll try to transition my shots to something else, the things that are easier to damage. So once again, there was a Cleveland, fired a salvo. Now, that Cleveland did move a little bit, so of course sometimes when you're firing whole salvos at a time, you will occasionally miss. And that's not a big deal, it happens. But again, here's 2 things I could have done right there. I could have gone in. I could have gone into that fight. Now, had I gone into that fight, that was the direction I was sailing, I would have come under the sort of sustained fire of 2 Warspites and a Cleveland, which is pretty much death wish, you know, being in a single battleship. So what I want to do is I want to sort of contain and isolate individual targets and engage them. So there you go, 16,000 on that Cleveland, half HP gone. And now I'm pulling away. I'm using this island as cover so that by the time I come out, I'm engaging a solitary target at a time, not coming under the fire of 2 battleships and a cruiser, which would have been terribly bad news. On my team, if you look south, there is one Cleveland, and I gotta say that Cleveland was pretty ballsy because he's gone in there to fight off a bunch of larger ships, and yeah, I don't know how he does, to be honest, but regardless, even if he died, I'm gonna stick to my plan. I'm gonna isolate. I'm gonna target the ships that are gonna cause problems for my team and just sort of pick them off one at a time. You'll see that I try to limit my exposure to enemy fire by either using my position or the angle of my armor to minimize damage. There you go. That Cleveland, which was busy engaging mine, presented a nice flat side to me, and of course, yeah. Armor piercing and battleships. Learn it, learn how to use it, learn how to citadel, and you know, people say that cruisers are OP, especially Clevelands, because of the HE thing, whatever. Yeah, a battleship can wipe a Cleveland out in like 2-3 salvos, so really keep that in mind when you are in a battleship, that really cruisers are food for you. You can punch through their armor and hit their citadels with no difficulty whatsoever. Anyways, 2 more Warspites. Now, if you look at our team right now, they still have 2 battleships, a Pensacola, which is a high tier cruiser, and we've got me, only remaining battleship, a carrier, 2 Clevelands, and a Sims. So really gotta try my best to deal with these 2 Warspites. And you'll see what I do is I keep my armor angled to one battleship so that if he fired AP, he wasn't gonna hit me that hard. Now, at the same time that I'm keeping angle to one battleship, I'm also keeping an eye out of my angle to the other Warspite as well. And I'm trying to keep the best possible angle to both battleships so that if they hit me, the damage will be minimal. Now, this Warspite kind of turns his side towards me, so I'm going to send a salvo at him. And there we go. That's about almost 10,000 damage, which is not too bad. It's not great, but it's not too bad because a battleship really only has so many 10Ks to give away. So there we go. The carrier finished him off, so now all of a sudden it's just one-on-one, me in a Warspite against the other Warspite. Of course, I'm going to have a little bit more help because I've got my cruiser with me. See, this is the thing. The enemy team made this mistake where even though they pushed hard with their battleships, and the battleships did the right thing, the cruisers didn't keep up, so the battleships didn't get the AA they needed, and they also aren't getting the supporting fire to deal with the smaller targets like other cruisers. So in a way, the enemy team has, well, really lost themselves this battle. This was a very winnable battle for them, and by doing what they did, they, I think in a way, lost this battle for themselves. Now, at this particular stage of the battle, the enemy Warspite is right on the southern border, and he's still at too sharp of an angle for me to shoot at. So had I actually decided to shoot at the Warspite, most likely would have bounced. So I instead opted to shoot at the Omaha, which was presenting sort of a nice flat side shot to me. Although I had to deploy my scout in order to reach that far, and well, scout shooting at me, sometimes it's good, sometimes not so good. Nevertheless, as I get closer, I decide to switch my target back to the Warspite as he is still the main threat. I've closed to within 8.2k of the Warspite, which now means if I shoot right, I can do huge amounts of damage to this battleship. One salvo, 15,000. There's my high caliber, by the way. That Warspite, which did manage to finish off our Cleveland, has basically taken so much damage from me that the next salvo that I fire will pretty much do him in. So while I get about to reloading my guns, I mean, one of the main things that I think most of you who've watched this battle should now sort of keep in mind or realize is that, when a team, especially the battleships, decides that it wants to push and push really hard, it really is dependent upon the supporting ships, whether it's cruisers or whatever, to just form up and help them out. Because I think the enemy team, had they had things like the Pensacola and everything with that, even that last battleship, I think 3 ships on 1, I think they would have finished me off, and then that remaining carrier that we have would have been either a very easy target or they could have simply decided to cap out. So while this was a pretty epic battle for me, it holds some valuable lessons for other people, which I think is that if you're seeing that your team is trying to make a push, you're watching your battleships and they're attempting to make a push, and you're in a cruiser, don't wander off by yourself. Go support them, stick with your battleships, lend your guns as support, because while battleships aren't battleships, you're able to get in a lot of HE damage or fire damage, and that is all going to be beneficial when your battleships are engaging other battleships. Now, even in this last situation here, had the battleship, the Warspite I just killed, had it had this Omaha and the Pensacola with it, and the fight was like a 3-on-1, that fight would have definitely gone more in favor of their Warspite than me. But of course, what I'm able to do pretty much this entire battle, if you look at it, is I'm pretty much able to fight things in isolation. Fight one battleship at a time, fight one cruiser at a time, you know, try to not engage multiple things at the same time. And that's also a very important lesson, I guess, for battleships, is that yes, remember, your guns, they don't fire particularly fast, they're very, very slow to reload, but they hold that punch. So what you want to be doing with your guns and your ship is isolating targets and engaging in, I hate to say this, but like one-on-one duels, and, you know, angle your armor and, you know, shoot accurately, shoot well, hit citadels or hit targets, whatever, and do massive amounts of damage. Finally, one last target, this Pensacola and me, and again, I've got it essentially in the best kind of position, which is in isolation. One-on-one, very, very, very little chance that a battleship is going to lose a fight against a cruiser in a one-on-one situation. Unless, of course, I completely derp, or he manages to, with some magical powers, detonates my magazine. Not really likely to happen too often, but, you know. Typically in this particular fight, I'm in a hugely advantageous position. So there we go, managed to hit a citadel and also grab myself a Confederate. Yay. By the way, love those EXP flags, those are like the best things you can get. Anyhow, so, you know, here we go. I had to quickly get myself off the border there, didn't really pay attention, I kind of ran into it. But, you know, in this particular situation, you'll see that I'll continue trying to keep myself as angled as possible so that the majority of his AP shots are bouncing, as you hear the sort of ricocheting sound. But what you see me doing is I'm trying to close that range. I'm trying to close that range because for some odd reason, while I've been firing at this Pensacola, my RNG has been a little bit wonky. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to close the range, minimize the distance so that my shots can more accurately be placed into the citadel while using my armor to essentially negate the Pensacola's attack. Although here, did angle out a little bit too flat and of course did take some pretty big damage. Nevertheless, the Pensacola is pretty much completely flat onto me, and of course, you know what's coming. One last salvo, front guns, and watch like the beautiful dispersion of the center two shells. Watch that. Look at that. There's two shells right there in the middle. Bam. Straight there. Two citadels. Get myself the kill. So finally, let's take a look at how I did there. Well, got myself 562,000 credits and 6,609 experience. Now, if I remember correctly, that 6,609 experience comes from my first win of the day and premium account. So, did not have a flag on the Warspite. I think had I had a flag, the experience gain should have been a touch bit more crazy. Now, my base experience in that particular battle was 2,937, which is not bad at all. And finally, let's take a look at the detail reports screen to see how much damage I did. And in that battle, managed 64 hits, out of which 57 were penetrations, doing a total of 165,000 damage. So that was pretty awesome. And of course, yes, those crucial base defense points on those cruisers at the end. And that's all, folks, for this episode of Epic Battles. Hopefully I've been able to, I guess, teach you some strategy or some gameplay and so on and so forth while you're watching this episode. I'm thinking that what I might be doing more is just simply taking epic battles and breaking them down and, you know, sort of commenting on things done right, things done wrong, so on and so forth. And hopefully that'll help you all become better players, first of all, and also second, to have more epic battles of your own. Of course, if you do have an epic battle and you do want to send those to me, please check the video description below, as there are instructions there on how to send me stuff. And finally, well, I was trying to get this episode uploaded a bit earlier, but I actually got called away because finally they fixed the car. Holy crap. Anyways, so the car's been fixed, which is good. You know, stuff's got to call the head office, try to resolve some remaining issues, and hopefully everything will be looking up for me. I hope you all are having a fantastic Wednesday. Hopefully, you know, have a great rest of the week, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all on the high seas.